Okay, hello everybody. I'm David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Welcome to the debate between the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives in New Jersey's 5th District, the Democratic incumbent, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, and the Republican nominee, businessman Frank Pallotta. This is an hour-long debate. It's sponsored by the New Jersey Globe and is being conducted virtually with each candidate at their own location. This is just one of the many adjustments that all of us had to face in the world as we've been dramatically affected by a pandemic. And this debate allows both candidates to reach voters in their district on critical issues facing New Jersey, the nation, the world, without placing anyone in peril. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement. After that, I'll ask a series of questions related to state, local, and federal issues regarding your campaign for Congress. Respectfully, I ask both candidates to stick to their allotted time. If a candidate goes a little too long, I'll hold my hand up. If that doesn't work, then I'll interrupt. These questions are mine. I have not shared them with anybody, and the questions will alternate between the two candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer, and I reserve the right of a follow-up question before we move on. My job is to be the moderator. It is not to take sides. It's not to give my opinion. So I will do that. I will just moderate. And we'll try to keep this debate moving forward, but I'll look to each of you to make sure that what your opponent says is based upon fact. If a candidate is attacked during the response, his opponent will receive an additional 30 seconds to respond. Each candidate will also have a chance to ask their opponent one question. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask that question and 60 seconds to respond, and we'll have a closing statement at the end. Prior to the start of this debate, we conducted a virtual coin toss. Congressman Gottheimer won that coin toss and opted to give the second opening statement and the second closing statement. So, Mr. Pallotta, we'll go to you for your opening statement.
Appreciate it, David. Thank you for having me here. Welcome, Congressman. Thanks for being here as well. On the open, just let me tell you a little bit why I'm running. I want to tell you what some of my goals are, but I want to start by telling you I grew up in Queens, New York in the 60s from a working class family. My mother was a nurse. My father was a toll collector. I was the second of 5 children who went to a New York City public high school, put myself through St. John's University. My parents instilled in me the values that Josh could only talk about. My wife, Patty, the original Jersey girl who I met her more than 30 years ago. She brought me here. I fell in love with Patty. I fell in love with the district, and I fell in love with New Jersey. This is why I'm running. I can and will do better. Josh is not what he says he is. He is not bipartisan. He is not a moderate. When you vote 96% with Nancy Pelosi and only 6% with Donald Trump, you are neither moderate nor bipartisan. He's the very definition of a DC insider. He will tell you that he is for veterans. He will tell you he is for police. He will tell you he is for a lot of things. Let me tell you what I am for. I am for seniors. I am for veterans. I am for the police, and I stand behind the police. I'm for the underserved. I'm for the unborn. That is who I am, and that is who I will protect. I will protect conservative values that are not left or right. They're not Republican. They're not Democrat. They are simply right and wrong. These are the conservative values that I will stand for. I will stand for small businesses. I will stand for lower taxes. I will stand for equality, and I will always stand for what is right. That is who I am, and that is what I've always been about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Congressman, let me ask you to give your opening statement.
Thank you, David, for hosting this important discussion. For nearly 4 years now, I've been honored to fight for the 5th District and protect our Jersey values. That's meant working to lower healthcare costs and cut taxes, to keep our air and our water clean, to fix our roads, to help our first responders keep us safe, and to look out for our veterans and seniors. My approach comes down to what I learned in the private sector. I'll work with anyone, regardless of party, if it's what's best for us. That's vital as we battle the COVID health and economic crisis. It's been my top priority to help families and small businesses, schools and nursing homes, and our hospitals and heroic healthcare workers, including securing resources for every single town in my district. And we need to continue to reopen our economy safely and pray for everyone who's lost a loved one. At the same time, my opponent refuses to wear masks around others, and he even said his first bill would be to outlaw masks. Nothing would be more devastating to our community's health and safety and to our businesses' ability to reopen. Unfortunately, Frank has never cared about protecting people. In fact, he has spent his career pushing fraudulent subprime mortgage schemes, causing seniors and veterans and our families to lose their homes. The bottom line on any issue, we can't let extremism rule the day. We must work together, and we need serious pragmatic leadership to help us recover and grow. I'll keep fighting to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman, I'm going to ask you the first question. I have called you the human fundraising machine. I hear it now from others, so I think the moniker is stuck. You've raised about $18 million over the last 5 years. Can a member of Congress really raise that much money without owing something to somebody?
Well, David, I'm very proud of one thing, and that's my fight for everyone in the district, Democrat or Republican. As you know, it's why I co-chair the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, 25 Democrats and 25 Republicans. We get together every single week with one mission: to get things done that make sense for my district. And so I'm very proud to wake up and worry about veterans and seniors and kids in our district and the water they drink and the air they breathe, to make sure that people can afford health care and to make sure that our roads and bridges are actually get rebuilt and that, frankly, things are more affordable for everybody here because our taxes are too high and need to be cut. That's why I work so hard to claw dollars back to the district. Very proud of the fact that we're up 108% since I was elected and clawing dollars back here from the moocher states. So, what I do is wake up, and that's my barometer. Unfortunately, as you know, and to run for office, you've got to raise resources. So we do. Both sides do. Frank does. I do. One of the biggest pieces of legislation I worked on this Congress is campaign finance reform. And so we need to fix the system. But in the meantime, what drives me is what's best for the 5th District.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. The congressman didn't answer, so I will. There are 435 members in Congress. The number one fundraiser, is Josh Gottheimer. Most of Josh Gottheimer's money has come from Wall Street. In fact, 10 of his top 20 donors are Wall Street firms. Your question was, will he be beholden to somebody? When 70% of his fundraising comes from outside the state, nearly 80 comes from outside the district, he is absolutely beholden to the people who have given him that much money. There are people in Congress for 10, 20, 30 years, but a man who's in Congress for 4 years is the number one fundraiser. Private equity, Wall Street, investment banking, all of them contribute to Josh. He's the number one fundraiser for them.
Okay, thank you. Congressman, your record was mentioned here. 30 seconds.
Sure. I think it's a bit galling for my opponent here, who literally spent his career making his money ripping off seniors and veterans in the subprime mortgage space, who has had to actually testify and before court about all of his subprime activity and how many millions he made, which is he's using now to fund his own campaign with this dirty money. I think it's a little bit ironic that he's attacking me for his own behavior. So I think it's a joke. He spent literally his whole career, that's how he made his money, ripping off Jersey seniors, veterans, and families. 10 million families lost their homes, and our economy tanked. So I don't think he has much credibility here.
Thank you, Mr. Pallotta. You appear to have emerged, and this is what some critics say, as an anti-masker. I counted 24 people in a photo posted on your Facebook page from a West Milford Republican event last week. Only one person was wearing a mask. You were not. In a teletown hall meeting last month, you said that if you are elected to Congress, your first move would be to outlaw masks once this pandemic goes away. And so my question is should people wear masks? And is this really the first thing you'd do in Congress?
Well, I think it's laughable that Josh thought when he tuned into the town hall, or he had one of his people tune into the town hall, it was a joking exchange on what people would do moving forward when this thing is finally over. And it was a joking exchange with people laughing. But in Josh's commercial, he dubbed out the laughing and made it sound like legislation. Of course, the congressman has been in Congress for 4 years. He knows you can't pass legislation to outlaw masks That's silly, and that's something that he does because it's a spin. The question about masks, nearly every single function that we have, especially the ones that are indoors, CDC guidelines call for temperatures, masks at the door. When you get inside, you can pull them off. That's really how we operate. And another thing, they're called CDC guidelines and not CDC mandates, which I know Josh's good friend Joe Biden is going to look to mandate when he becomes the president, if he becomes the president. So I think it's a little silly that as a country, we need to move forward. We are looking at death rates, we are looking at ventilator rates, and we are looking at overnight hospital stays at near zero. Even though we're seeing a pickup in the COVID reporting, the hospitalization rates and people getting sick are near zero. So it's really funny that when people are starving, people are losing their homes. Under you, Josh, people are losing their homes, that someone's worried about masks. I wear a mask, Josh. I just don't pull it up over my eyes like you do.
Okay. Congressman, let me get your rebuttal to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing funny, in my opinion, as Frank's saying, about the 210,000 people and more who've died in our country, and the nearly 3,700 who've died in the district and in the counties that I represent. And I've seen those photos, all those photos of Frank not wearing masks. I don't understand why he doesn't believe in science. We know that if you wear a mask, the odds of the numbers going down are great and staying down are great. People have made great sacrifice here in New Jersey to get the numbers down. We need to keep them down. And the best way is for people to wear masks. You know, this confounds me. I don't get it. I don't get why he's a COVID denier. And it's throwing out all these other facts. The bottom line is everyone should wear a mask. And that's the best way we know right now to keep it from spreading. And so we need actual real leadership right now. We need to reopen safely. And that's the best way to do so.
Thank you. Congressman, the Paramus Veterans Home in your district lost 81 veterans and seniors to coronavirus. It's something that you have said was a result of failed leadership and negligence. Recently, there was a change made in the leadership of that home. What can Congress do to protect our nation's veterans and make them feel safe living in a government-run facility?
Well, as you know, that the state-run facility in Paramus, it was just heartbreaking. As soon as we found out about it, Bill Pascrell and I were all over it and got the National Guard there, as well as VA medics. But it's heartbreaking how many veterans lost their lives, as they did in so many facilities across our state. As you know, Chris Smith, who's a Republican from New Jersey, and I introduced the Nursing Home Pandemic Protection Act to actually put out guidelines to make sure that if we have another spike or another pandemic, that we don't face the same situation, both in veterans' homes and all of our nursing homes, including making sure that there are masks and other PPE on site, that there are crisis plans prepared before, to make sure that we actually inform families and the CDC when there is an outbreak at one of these facilities, that there's testing, and really the families get communication, because as you know, far too many families weren't communicated with during this, and that's so heartbreaking for both the families and the resident. And that's why, just this past week, Senator Booker introduced this legislation in the Senate. Now we got to get it across the finish line, because unfortunately, so many veterans and seniors lost their lives during the first outbreak there, and we can't allow that again. And our heart breaks for all their families. We need accountability, which is why I'm glad we had that, and the governor did what we called for and fired the head of those homes. But the bottom line is, it's going forward that we need to make sure we're prepared as we head into flu season here.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, it's the same question. What can Congress do to protect veterans, to those veterans living in a government-run facility, to make them feel safe?
Well, first of all, I think what it takes is crisis management and leadership, and we clearly didn't have that. When these veterans were dying, when they started to get sick, there were facilities we could have put them in. There are places that could have been segregated. Josh, I know that you were quarantined at one point. You self-quarantined when you were exposed without a mask. And I think that was about the time that we started to see the veterans die. We also know that Mr. Petarsky, who asked you to come to the veterans facility, to stay socially distanced, maybe 50 or 100 yards away from the facility, just so the nurses and the workers, that there was somebody from Congress, somebody in some form of leadership that could come by and let them know everything's going to be okay. You didn't. You refused. In fact, you told Mr. Petarsky that you're a non-essential worker and you couldn't be there. They weren't asking you to change bed sheets like the CEO was doing. They didn't ask you to do anything different like the CEO was doing. That CEO was fired for doing exactly what he should have done when leadership was missing. Leaders lead, and I just don't think that many of these congressmen who have been there for a lifetime know the ability and know how to lead and know how to manage through crisis. And unfortunately, that's what I think happened in the facility.
All right, Congressman, your record was brought up, so let me give you 30 seconds.
Sure. I mean, this is once again gets back to the point about science and following science, and that's what we should all do. That's why it's disappointing once again that my opponent doesn't believe in wearing face masks or doesn't believe in encouraging people to. We knew the guidelines were it would not be smart unless you absolutely had to go into a nursing home at the time. If you could be helpful, the idea is if you couldn't, you shouldn't be there. And that was the directive from the governor. These were state mandates, and I followed them because that's what you should do. And those were based on directives from the CDC and from the VA and from science. But the bottom line is, in the state-run facility, we've learned a lot in these last months in all of our long-term care facilities. And now we've got to do the responsible thing and make sure that we follow a plan as we head into flu season to make sure this doesn't happen again in this state-run veterans home or, frankly, in any facility in New Jersey. And that's what I'm committed to. It's why I'm sponsoring bipartisan legislation that's now in the Senate as well to get this done so we can help prevent a tragedy like that happened in the state-run facility in Paramus, but also in so many other parts of my district.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, New Jersey's seeing a significant spike right now in COVID cases. You have criticized Governor Murphy's handling of the pandemic, and you've praised President Trump. So if the president were to call you today and say, Frank, tell me what to do, would you tell Donald Trump to stay the course, that he's doing a great job? Or are there things you think he's doing wrong in reacting to this pandemic? And if so, what are they?
Well, I don't think he's doing anything wrong. I think early on when he shut it down, when most congressmen on the Democrat side called him a xenophobe, called him a racist, he was the first person to shut down China, even though he was called names. He's now coming out and he's saying we should start to open up smartly. He's not talking about going out there and opening things up. A 74-year-old grandfather contracted COVID. His 50-something wife contracted COVID. His son contracted COVID. He was out on the campaign trail in 72 hours. Josh, you have to look at the science. The science is not just about COVID. It's about mortality rates. It's about ventilator rates. It's about who's getting sick and who's staying over. It's you who are not paying attention to the science. The real thing we need to start working about, what we need to start talking about, is not just listening to the medical experts. Let's listen to economic experts. Let's listen to mental health experts. We have to listen to people who are going to tell us how to open up safely, how to get people back to churches, how to get our businesses open again, how we get people to start to act like this is normal. I lived through September 11th. The best thing to happen a month or so after September 11th, move forward. We're America. We're supposed to move forward. The science is telling us that people aren't dying. The science is telling us that people aren't getting sick. We need to figure out how to move forward. That's what the president's doing, and that's what I will do.
Thank you. Congressman, let me ask you the same question.
That's exactly why we need to listen to the scientists so that we can move forward. Under Frank's ideas, where he says that we should listen to the economists, not to medical experts a second ago. I mean, the whole idea is to be able to open to prevent a spread so businesses can reopen and we can get back to life. And I think we all want to, but we're not going to do it if we actually rip off our masks and all crowd with each other like Frank did 2 weeks ago in a big rally with thousands of people next to each other refusing to wear masks and, calling people names if they did wear them. Unfortunately, the president didn't lead when we needed him to lead. And there was no national strategy. There was no plan. He left it to all the governors to compete with each other and to get things done. Our governor stepped up and got our numbers down and helped lead. In a moment like this, it's not about party. It's about just getting things done and making sure we have a plan for PPE, to make sure that we actually have a plan to get those ventilators if we need them, to make sure that we can do everything we can to keep our families safe in a very difficult time, to make sure our frontline medical workers had what they needed. This is about giving smart advice to the country, making sure you have a testing strategy, a national testing strategy, making sure that you actually have tests, making sure that whatever we do, we can prevent the amount of people who died in this first wave from happening again, including the nearly 3,700 in our district. And I can't look at any of them and say, well, we should have listened to the economist on that one and not to the medical experts or followed science. That's just outrageous. The best way to do it is to listen to science and make sure that we can move forward so that we can reopen and get our economy where it should be here in the greatest country in the world.
Thank you. Congressman, you voted for Nancy.
Did he invoke my record, David? I'm sorry. Didn't he invoke a record and mention my name? I might have just heard it at the beginning. I thought he did.
30 seconds. Sure. Go ahead.
Science comes in a lot of different forms, Josh. I didn't say to take an economics lesson, which you probably could use. I said you need to look at the economics. Our small businesses are suffering. Death rates, mortality rates, ventilator rates are near zero. These small businesses, Josh, in your district, 19,000 of them are suffering. They're broke. They're dipping into their 401ks. It's not an economics lesson. It's a reality lesson. You need to listen to people who understand how to open up small businesses and not hide behind your mask, Josh. We need them. You don't hide behind them. Thank you.
Well, I think I get to respond to that as well, David.
Yes.
Frank, I spend a lot of time every week talking to our small businesses. It's why actually we fought so hard to get 3.5 packages passed, including, as you probably know, the PPP program, which was so critical to helping so many of our small businesses in our district. Make sure we get through this. And it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking how many businesses have been hurt, how many jobs cost. And, you know, the good news is our unemployment rates are coming back down, but far too many people are unemployed right now. It's why we're actually working right now, Democrats and Republicans, to get this next COVID package done with another round of PPP to get through this very tough time. We must. But the bottom line is the best way we're going to do it is by following science, being smart so we can get through this. Look at our numbers in New Jersey. There's a reason why our numbers are so much lower than other parts of the country and a lot of red states that just didn't follow the science.
Thank you. This is the 4th congressional debate that I've moderated this year. And there are two omnipresent figures in these debates. One is Donald Trump and the other is Nancy Pelosi. And Congressman, you voted for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. If you get reelected and Democrats keep the House, will you do that again?
If she runs, I'll strongly consider it. But the bottom line is what I focus on every single time, David, is making sure I do what's best for the district. And I don't worry about national politics. I worry about what's best for New Jersey's 5th. As you know, I co-chair the Problem Solvers Caucus, as I mentioned. I was named the most bipartisan member of Congress more than once, have support from the Chamber of Commerce and the Fraternal Order of Police and the state troopers, because the bottom line is I work with everyone if it's what's best for us. And, you know, my leadership doesn't always love it that we do what's best and fight every side. And that's okay. I don't work for them. I work for the 5th District, and that's my approach, and it'll continue to be my approach.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta?
I don't know who's voting for the most bipartisan, but when you're 6% with the president and you're 96% with Nancy Pelosi, I know a little bit about math. I don't think that's anywhere near bipartisan. So maybe we should look into the bipartisan participants on this. Look, it's about representing your district. Okay, you're not representing the people in DC. You're not representing your Hollywood elites, Josh. And for example, when 68% of this district did not want an impeachment, you went for it. I don't think that's really doing what your district calls for. When you introduced HR 7120, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point, nearly 90% of the people, when they looked through that, was not about defunding the police, and that is what you voted for. You've got a lot of words around it. That's what you voted for. So when 68% didn't want an impeachment and nearly 90% don't want to defund the police, and you vote for that, you're not voting in the best interest of your district. You're voting in the best interest of your special interests. And that is AOC, that is Nancy Pelosi, and that is all your other elites in DC and all your other elites in Washington and Hollywood.
Congressman, let me give you the last word on your records.
Yeah, the bottom line is obviously I don't believe we should defund the police, but you know, Mr. Pallotta decides to just make up whatever he wants. He makes up statistics that please him, and that's fine. He's just typical politics. It's what people do. It's exactly what people can't stand. You know, my approach has been very simple and straightforward ever since I was elected, to work with both sides to get things done of what's best for us. It's why there's a large group of local officials and business leaders of Republicans who've endorsed me, and as why the Lugar Center at Georgetown has ranked me the most bipartisan Democrat in the House, because it's my record. It's very clear. You can look it up and you can see all the legislation we work on together. And I think that's what our country wants. They want civility. They want us to work together to get things done. And that's how we've gotten through COVID. It's how we got the government reopened together. I was in the Situation Room literally when Dr. Birx's first day on the job with the vice president and with Democrats and Republicans talking about how we had to make sure we did what's best for our country and not let politics get into it. I just wish we could follow that approach with every issue because we'd get a lot more done.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, you've put $1.6 million of your own money into this campaign for Congress. You were a successful Wall Street investment banker, but you've been criticized for making some of that money by advocating for subprime mortgages. These are high-risk home loans that contributed to the mortgage crisis in 2008 and contributed toward an economic recession. Now, you have strongly denied this, and two of your former colleagues testified under oath that you were involved. So my question to you is, were you involved in the subprime mortgage business when you were at Morgan Stanley?
Well, the answer is no. I was never involved in the subprime business ever. I know that's a talking point that Josh likes to throw out there. He likes to throw buzzwords like subprime. I was not in subprime. It was handled in a different area of the firm. It was handled by different managers. It was handled on a different floor. I think what you're referring to, David, was someone who was talking about a conference call where a number of people were on the call. I think 6 or 8 or 10 people. And anyone who's in a professional environment knows that when you get on a conference call, there's lots of people from lots of different divisions. A subprime question was asked. I didn't answer it because I wasn't involved. So the real answer is I've never been involved in subprime. And what Josh said earlier about testifying, I didn't testify, Josh. It's called a deposition. A deposition, as you know, as a lawyer, is a form of discovery. Discovery happens when people want to find out what's going on. 1,600 depositions between 2 firms that I worked at. You want to know how many depositions I was in, Scott? Josh, two depositions. And that was it. You want to know why? They discovered nothing. You know the legal process. Depositions happen all the time. It's getting to the bottom of the deposition that matters. So I was never in subprime, ever. I was deposed twice, and they found nothing. And I was on lots and lots of conference calls, Josh. If you were in the private sector, you would know. If you were a leader, you would know you get called on a lot of different things. You personally get called on a lot of things in Congress that you may or may not opine on. A lot of that happens in the private sector as well. So to answer your question, David, I was never in subprime, never pushed subprime risky assets to veterans. I actually helped veterans through the mortgage crisis and received a Time Magazine award for it. And that Time Magazine is not known as a bastion of conservatism either. So to answer your question, David, I wasn't.
Thank you. Congressman?
Well, I think Frank spent his career defrauding seniors and veterans with subprime mortgages, so I guess he's trying to pull over another fraud here on the voters. You know, your former colleague said under oath in a deposition, and I'll post it on my website at joshforcongress.com as soon as this debate's over, that you were hawking subprime mortgages. It was an April 2016 deposition from Francis Teleska, who was Morgan Stanley executive director, and a February 2016 deposition from Lisa Drew, a former Morgan Stanley vice president. Again, I'll post the depositions. They're under oath. I know this as a lawyer and as someone who also spent the majority of his career in the private sector. I'm aware of what depositions are. And so we'll post them and everyone can judge for themselves. That's the bottom line. That's how you made your money. It's how you're helping bankroll your campaign, ripping off seniors and veterans. We know what the subprime mortgage crisis caused on our country, how it ripped so many of our families out of their homes. You were part of it. It's how you're paying for your campaign. And I just think you should come clean with people.
Mr. Pallotta, let me give you 30 seconds more.
Absolutely. You should know a little bit about subprime, Josh. When you went to Burson Marsteller, the first account that you covered was Countrywide. Burson Marsteller, by the way, is the #1 international public relations firm that protects dictators who kill their own citizens, who jail the gays, and who subjugate women. So you should know about subprime because Countrywide was one of your clients. Maybe that's where you learned a little bit about it. But you might want to post exactly what Lisa Drew said, because I saw that. And Lisa Drew basically said, I don't know if Frank was even involved in the transaction that they were talking about. So be my guest, Josh. Post what you like. You can talk to anybody. I was never in the subprime business, but I appreciate you trying to use your spin from Burson Marsteller to try and do exactly what you've always done in your career, and that is spin.
All right. Congressman, your private sector record was invoked, so you're entitled to 30 more seconds.
Well, I think we should get back to the issues, but before we do, I'll just make the point that some of these clients that Burson Marsteller, which has thousands of clients that he mentions, I think were in the 1970s. I was, I think, 4 years old. So I was obviously not at the firm. I think I was in nursery school. But again, I will post those depositions that were made under oath about Frank's involvement in the subprime mortgage space. And again, they're all under oath. Their depositions, we'll post them, and people can make their own judgments.
So, Congressman, you introduced two new phrases into the New Jersey political vocabulary: moocher states and clawbacks. What does that mean to the people who live in the 5th District?
So, unfortunately, my predecessor, who was in Congress for 14 years, was one thing he didn't believe in, and consistently, he didn't believe in fighting to get dollars back to the district. There's a lot of grant dollars made available every single year for things like fire trucks and to hire law enforcement to help our nonprofits and things like Head Start that are available to the district. You have to people have to apply. You've got to work with our first responders. You've got to work closely with our mayors and our councils, and they apply and you help them fight for those resources. It's one of the biggest areas I focused on when I got elected, because I realized New Jersey had historically always been left out, especially in the 5th District. We had gotten pennies on the dollar in terms of what we sent to Washington, what we got back. And you had other states like Mississippi and Alabama, they're getting $4.35 and $4.38 back for every dollar they send to Washington. And we were getting, somewhere around 33 cents on the dollar. It's outrageous that we pay all we do in taxes, which I believe should be lower. And then we don't even get the dollars back in form of these grants and to help our cops and our firefighters and our communities. So it's been a huge focus of mine to claw those dollars back to the 5th District, work with our first responders and our mayors and our councils. We're up 108% in terms of when I was elected to get fire trucks and help get equipment. It's more than $448 per family just in the last year. Per household in the last year alone. And that helps obviously get our property taxes down if we can get those dollars back here, and our communities don't need to spend the money for it. And so that's the way we got to keep beating the moocher states.
So, Mr. Pallotta, let me let you respond.
Well, sure. If you're getting anything back and it's helping keeping our property taxes down, you're doing exactly the wrong thing. Look, when you started, I remember hearing you talk about, to your point, we're only getting 33 cents back on the dollar for every dollar we send to Washington. That was the case in year 1. That was the case in year 2. That was the case in year 3, and it looks to be the case in year 4. At what point, Josh, are you going to fulfill any one of the promises that you came up with when you ran 4 years ago against Scott Garrett? We're still at 33 cents on the dollar. And the fire trucks and everything you get back, that's great, that's terrific. But you talked about lowering taxes, lowering property taxes just 5 seconds ago, and you haven't. So I think you need to start to come clean on promises versus delivery.
Congressman, 30 seconds more for you.
I mean, facts are facts. We're up 108% more in federal tax dollars clawed back to the district from the moocher states. I'll give you a couple. That's $448 for each 5th District household. Very proud of those resources we were able to get back away from Mississippi and Alabama, some of the other states. $787,000 back to New Milford for a new fire truck. Recently in Belvedere and Warren County, we were able to get resources worth $857 per family to help save on the municipal budget. We were able to, Allendale was able to get back $183,000 to get self-contained breathing apparatus kits for firefighters. I've got long lists. I'm happy to post those too of all the dollars we were able to claw back working with our communities. Very proud of that.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, let me ask you a follow-up on this issue of moocher states. Recently in his debate with his Democratic opponent, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the United States Senate, said that his position allows him to take dollars from states like New York. And I am presuming that he also means states like New Jersey and bring them to Kentucky. So strictly from a local politics point of view, is it in the best interest of your constituents in Bergen and Passaic and Warren and Sussex counties that Mitch McConnell get reelected to the U.S. Senate?
Absolutely. I mean, the money that goes back and forth to Washington, back and forth to the states, is a function of the GDP and the wealth of those states. So New York and New Jersey, they do pay more, and they do pay it. And Mississippi and Kentucky and the others do get it. Look, it's fair. That's how it happens. That's how the Constitution was written. So the fact that we get 33 cents back on the dollar you expect something less than the dollar that gets sent forward or gets sent to states like Mississippi or places like that. But it's really about trying to figure out how to get a little bit more. The moocher and the clawback that I know Josh talks about all the time, it's not moving the dial. He's not doing it. So to answer your question, David, we do send more money than we get back. The problem is, how do we capitalize on the money that comes back? And how do we really put ourselves in a position where that money and those proceeds that come back make our economy and make our district, to Josh's point, better? So it's really a function of the state or the individual state GDPs is how those numbers are determined.
Thank you, Congressman. Just quickly, best interest of your district or not for Mitch McConnell to get reelected?
Kentucky gets $1.95 for every dollar. The whole thing is a joke, right? I mean, when Hurricane Sandy happened, the red states didn't want to help us. When COVID's happened, they don't want to send any money back to our states because they claim they don't want to take care of blue states and then help our state and local budgets. They, as you know, were the architect of gutting the state and local tax deduction, which Frank is opposed to reinstating, which I don't understand why he'd be opposed to that. But once again, like time and again, the moocher states, these red states rip us off. We're their piggy bank. I think the whole thing is a joke. We should be getting far more back here in New Jersey and getting our taxes down instead of sending these dollars to the moocher states who just keep ripping us off and robbing us blind.
Thank you.
Try and get some back then, Josh.
Let's move on. Each of you were exposed to politics at a young age. And Mr. Pallotta, your Uncle Bob served as the mayor of his hometown and is a Bergen County freeholder. And I know he had a strong influence on your life. And Congressman, when you were 16, Frank Lautenberg made you a U.S. Senate page. This campaign hasn't been easy for either of you. You've both faced attacks on your records and your reputations. And it's a time where politics in this country is divisive and it's intense. And so here's my question, and I'll ask both of you, Congressman Gottheimer, if you go first. You both have 2 children. Based on your experience in life and in this campaign, would you encourage your own children to run for public office someday?
I hope they do, and I hope they want to. You know, we live in the greatest country in the world, and yeah, we hit some bumps along the way, but I know that our best days are ahead of us, and I know my kids would do a wonderful job. But frankly, I hope that other kids who are watching this or watching the other debates, that they get excited about our country and about helping other people. And that's the best part of it. It's what I learned from Frank Lautenberg at 16 years old, when I watched him ban smoking on airplanes and fight for all the things he fought for. You know, that to me was the idea that you could pick up a phone. I remember I was in his office and he asked to help him if I could help once, pick up the phone and help a senior get her Social Security check because it was stuck in some muck somewhere. And to me, that's what's so great about helping other folks. And there's plenty of ways to give back. This is just one way. And so whether my kids do it or not, or they follow some other way to help, I think it's really, really important that we do the right thing. It's why I work with Democrats and Republicans and because I think it's so important that we work together and we bring civility back to the process.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you want your children to run for office someday?
I do. They can certainly do what they want. I have one son who's a little more interested than the other, but they both want to help. My thought to them, and they agree, we've had this conversation, I spent 28 years in the private sector. I think every single congressman, every single senator should spend some time in the private sector. You need to have signed both the front and the back of a paycheck. You need to look people in the eye and let them know that in my company, which I did in my career, and I know my boys are doing in their career, you don't look at party. You look at what's best for either your shareholders or your customers. In politics, your shareholders and customers are your voters. So to your point about my Uncle Bobby, when I reached out to him before I decided to run, I asked him if he would do anything different. He said, yep, I would start earlier. He said, I had a job very early on, and I saw what it was like when somebody would come into my store and somebody would come into the amusement park, and they would basically, talk about what their family was about, talk about what hurt them, what didn't hurt them. And that's what made Bobby go into politics. The ability to connect. That's why I went into it. When I was done, my ability to help veterans. And my boys saw this, and it was one of the proudest things they said. Spent 28 years in the private sector. The last thing I did when I helped veterans, they told me was the most exciting thing that they saw me do. So I do want them to help. I want them in politics, but I want them to do it for the right reasons.
Thank you.
Can I just agree with something that Frank said, if I can?
Sure.
agree. I think it's really important. I agree that people who go into public life should spend time in the private sector. And I think that's exactly right.
Thank you. Thank you. And at this point in the debate, as we're about to have you each ask a question of each other, I'm glad that we're moving on in this debate on a position that you both agree with, and I will look forward to a Gottheimer Pallotta race someday, 20, 30 years from now, and around to watch it.
I bet you do.
So you're each going to have 30 seconds to ask your question. Your opponent's going to have a minute to respond. Then you'll have 30 seconds more if you wish for a rebuttal. Congressman Gottheimer, I'd like you to ask a question to Mr. Pallotta.
Sure. The state of New Jersey said that homegrown violent extremists are the greatest threat to New Jersey. Frank was featured on Facebook on July 1st, July 9th, September 20th, and at other points, arm in arm with one of his closest campaign advisors, Bill Hayden, the head of the Oath Keepers, a New Jersey homegrown terrorist group that promotes white supremacy. I've got many photos here. The Oath Keepers have a documented record of blatant racism and anti-Semitism and of being anti-government and anti-law enforcement. Frank, why are you embracing extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and Bill Hayden and your other extremist supporters rather than denouncing them? And will you denounce the Oath Keepers and Bill Hayden?
Mr. Pallotta, I'll let you respond to that.
You know what? I think 1992 called, Josh, and they want their definition of racism back. My supporters are my supporters. They're not racists. They're not xenophobes. They're not homegrown terrorists. You can put the picture down, Josh. They're not homegrown terrorists. They're good people. They're your people. They're in your district. When people hurt, when people have a need, you sit with them and you talk with them. I don't know what you think where we sit around and talk about crazy things. These are your people, Josh. These are people who work every day, who raise their family. So are you asking if I will denounce people who have worked with me, people I talk to every day, people who are not homegrown terrorists? That's your label, not theirs. You're picking a name out of Oath Keepers. You did that to Scott Garrett a number of years ago. It's not going to work with me. On a radio debate, you called my, and your followers racist. You did it again. That is your deplorables moment, Josh. You can't do that to the people in this district. So to answer your question, I will absolutely be friendly with anybody who wants to hear me and hear what I can do for the district. I tell you what I will do. I will denounce Antifa, which I know that you people haven't done. I will denounce Black Lives Matter organization, which you have not done either. So that's what I will do.
Congressman, if you'd like to respond, you have the options.
Well, I mean, I just am asking him to please denounce a group called the Oath Keepers, which is on the New Jersey Homegrown Terrorist Watch List. You can look it up on the New Jersey page. Bill Hayden is one of the leaders of that group called the Oath Keepers. Again, they are anti-government, anti-law enforcement, anti-Semitic, blatant racists. I'm just saying this group that he's arm in arm with one of the guys who runs it, will he please denounce the group? I don't understand. I think we should all stand up and oppose anyone who uses violence or hate and as a key component of who they are, and especially when there's a growing, a burgeoning threat in the state of New Jersey, not just for ISIS-inspired homegrown terrorists, but also white supremacists. So I think we should all stand up to hate.
No, I disagree. There are police officers and veterans who are part of the Oath Keepers. So you need to take a good hard look, Josh. I know you defunded them just a few months ago, but those cops and those veterans are part of this organization. And I think you need to rethink what the Oath Keepers is. And I can say
you're defending, so you stand by the Oath Keepers and you're defending.
Josh, I stand by the people of the fifth.
Right.
I don't stand next to racists and xenophobes.
If you want to stand by racists, and that's all you. I mean, I just don't unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that you stand by them. But okay, that's up to you.
Okay, let's move on. One of the pitfalls of Zoom is when you both talk at the same time, neither of you are heard. So maybe network should try the system. But Mr. Pallotta, it's your turn to ask a question of Congressman Gottheimer.
Sure. Executive Order 103 by Phil Murphy. And I know you don't like me to talk about Phil Murphy, but your people died in your district on your watch. But Executive Order 103 by Phil Murphy had people, sick people, veterans, and the elderly go back to their facilities, not allowed to be checked for COVID. So Congressman, do you believe Governor Murphy's administration should be criminally investigated over their decision to mandate nursing homes and have them accept COVID patients?
I've made it pretty clear from the beginning that I think we should be looking into everything that happened when it comes to nursing homes. Something I called for very early on. It's actually why I was on the phone as soon as I found out what was going on at the state-run veterans home. Again, it's a state-run facility. So as soon as I heard from one of the families, one of my constituents, what was going on, we got on the phone with the governor's office, obviously spoke to the National Guard, got the Guard there, got the VA medics on the ground, not just in that facility, but then spoke to the vice president's office and to others at the VA to make sure we could get guards to other nursing homes in the state of New Jersey. As you know, and what happened in Andover, New Jersey, was just heartbreaking at the clinic, at the veterans, at the nursing home there, and how many people lost their lives. It's why we've called for investigations there and made sure we got them as much help as humanly possible overnight. I was able to get additional resources for VA oversight just recently in the appropriations process to get more so that we have clear and stronger oversight, not just, Frank, over the VA homes, the state-run VA homes, but over all nursing homes in the state of New Jersey. And I think we need to get to the bottom of it. What I am most focused on right now, which I hope we all are we ready for a flu season, for a potential another spike? In Paramus, there was unfortunately another outbreak last week that we heard of. There's been a few of our senior homes around the district, our long-term care facilities, where there's been outbreaks recently. We need to get all over that to make sure we can do everything we can to protect our seniors.
Hey, Mr. Pallotta, let me give you an opportunity.
Look, I know I've worked with the people in Andover, and I know they were reaching out to your office, Josh, for months before the pandemic, for months with no response. And that's been documented. I know a reporter was fired for exposing that story, and I'm sure that was a pure coincidence. But the problem about you not going to the veterans facility in Paramus, when you were, I understand Phil Murphy told you to stay away, 100 yards away, wave at the nurses, wave at the people working overnight. He didn't do it. He didn't do it when they needed you the most. So look, I agree that we need to help our veterans and our seniors. They are our most vulnerable, but leaders lead, and you just got to show up. That's it. Wear a mask, wear a hazmat suit, show up and let them know you care.
Okay, thank you. Congressman, your record was involved, so.
I'll never forget the phone call I got on a Saturday night at 5:00 from the head of Andover, that center, and with tears in her eyes, she asked me if I could help get additional body bags to that location on a Saturday night, because so many people had died over the last couple of days, and she couldn't find the owner of the facility to get help. Within minutes of getting that call, we were on with OEM, local OEM, and of course with the governor's office. We got body bags there that night, and it was heartbreaking, and obviously on with them every single day until we were able to try to get that situation under control, work with the local mayor and OEM to make that happen, just as we did in Paramus. You know, again, this goes back to the fact that we follow science, and you don't go into facilities and expose yourself and really, forget me, it's putting them at risk. That was the direction we got. And that's why we followed the directives. And I know you don't believe in face masks. I know it's the first business you want to do is ban face masks when you get to Congress. But the bottom line is we know that we follow science, and that's how we save lives. And that's what we must continue to do, all leaders.
Thank you. Let me move on to another issue, which is health insurance. And Congressman, there's about 30 million Americans that are still uninsured. And if the U.S. Supreme Court were to declare the Affordable Care Act as unconstitutional, or even if they don't, what's your plan to make sure that everyone in your district and everyone in your nation has health care?
Well, as you know, healthcare costs are far too expensive right now, and we've seen this especially with the COVID crisis, even with the best doctors and nurses in the entire world. It's why I believe that we must protect and strengthen the Affordable Care Act, and especially to protect patients with pre-existing conditions with affordable healthcare coverage for everyone, and allow Americans to keep their provider and their private health insurance and see their own doctor. You know, I voted time and again to efforts to gut and repeal the Affordable Care Act over in this last Congress. It's outrageous over the last 4 years how many times the other side has tried to just decimate the Affordable Care Act, and pre-existing conditions. We see it now, as you just mentioned, David, with the Supreme Court and their efforts there. And if the Supreme Court overturns it, we have to go back and fix it through the legislative process and strengthen and protect the Affordable Care Act. To me, that's the best answer. At the same time, we need to make sure that we make healthcare more affordable. It's why we're able, and I'm very proud of the bipartisan efforts I led to get the health insurance tax eliminated, the Cadillac tax repealed, the medical device tax repealed, all things that we worked on with the Problem Solvers Caucus, bipartisan, to make healthcare more affordable, and also passing HR 3 to get the cost of prescription drugs down. So it's not an overnight easy fix. We've got a lot of work to do, but the bottom line is we got to get back to work immediately in the new administration to get this done.
Thank you, Mr. Pallotta. My question to you is the same. What is your plan to make sure that people in your district get health care?
Sure. Look, the healthcare situation we have now, the problems we have, it's never been about health. It's never been about care. Obamacare has benefited one group. Insurers' profits, health and care insurers' profits are up about 600% since Obamacare. I'm paying more money out of my pocket. I don't think there's anybody in this state that isn't paying more money out of their pocket for health insurance. Doctors are struggling. They're not even going into the practice. So the patient and the doctor are suffering and the insurers are making money. That's a problem. That's a problem when government takes over. So what I would suggest doing is trying to introduce more private sector solutions into the equation. Why? Because I think when you pull the government out of certain, you leave the oversight of the government, but you execute it more on the private sector side. I think we need to look at prescription drugs. What the president is talking about is already going down the road of lowering prescription drugs. Pre-existing conditions, I think the left likes to talk about pre-existing conditions being trashed by the president. The president wants to keep the notion of pre-existing conditions covered. And we need to bring down the state borders. There's an issue in again, not the health, not the insurance part of this thing, but it's about how it's executed. So we all know early on, and I think it was 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, whenever Obamacare launched, the billions of dollars it took just to get the website running, get the government out of the way, figure out how to bring the private sector solutions back into the equation, lower healthcare costs, lower insurance, and I think that's what we all need overall.
So, Mr. Pallotta, let me ask you a follow-up. Would you be willing to say unequivocally that you would never vote for a piece of healthcare legislation that doesn't protect those with pre-existing conditions?
I stand with the president, and the president wants to protect pre-existing conditions, and I stand with him on that stance.
Okay. Mr. Gottheimer, same question for you.
I mean, the president has spent 4 years gutting the Affordable Care Act and eviscerating the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I mean, that's just the plan. It's why they're going to the Supreme Court to fulfill that plan. If we repeal the Affordable Care Act and gut it the way the Republicans tried for years now, 800,000 people in New Jersey would lose health care coverage, and not to mention all those with pre-existing conditions as part of that 800,000. So what we need to do is strengthen the Affordable Care Act and fix it where it needs to be fixed and make it better and to help people and to make prescription drugs more affordable and to make healthcare more affordable for people. That's the bottom line. But I didn't really hear a plan from my opponent. I don't know what the plan is, but the bottom line is we need a clear plan because a lot of people, as we saw in these last months, need healthcare coverage, and it shouldn't be something that they hope for. It should be something that they get.
Thank you. I want to move on. Mr. Pallotta, this is a question that candidates all across America are being asked. Do you believe that systemic racism exists in this country?
Systemic racism? No. I think there's work we can all do on getting together and getting along. Systemic racism does not exist. Certainly not across my district. There are 536,000 people in my district. They respect everyone. I know Josh would like to think that systemic racism exists. I don't think it does. I think there are differences that we have. There are differences we can talk through. I think we have more problems in Congress where people don't talk to each other than we do systemic racism. I think there are factions that certainly have their positions that are counter to the other side. And we need to work on making sure that we all understand each other. But to answer the question, David, systemic racism, I don't think it exists.
Okay, thank you. Congressman, do you think it exists?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately, yes. But I think the bottom line is people are good people and New Jersey. And the bottom line is we got to keep working through this to address it. I mean, unfortunately, and the ADL will tell you this, hate is up to the highest level it's been in many, many years. that's against all groups. And, people are more divided than ever. If you go on social media, you can in 2 seconds see the problem that exists and how people speak to one another. And so we have work to do. Again, we live in the greatest country in the world, so we'll get there. And we've made great progress. But the bottom line is, as we're seeing, with groups like the Oath Keepers and other groups, virulent racism. And so we have to keep working to combat it.
Okay, thank you. And Congressman, in March 2019, you said you opposed the legalization of marijuana at a federal level. I assume you've already voted, you've already cast your ballot for this election. Did you vote yes or no on public question number 1 to legalize adult use recreational marijuana in New Jersey?
Well, let me tell you my position on legalization. I support medical marijuana, and there's ample evidence of how this can help cancer patients and those with chronic pain. I've also voted for the legal use of the banking system with the Safe Banking Act. My concern on full legalization at this point is twofold. One, we don't have the ability, as you know, to test someone when they get pulled over. We don't have rapid tests available like we do for DUI. So if someone's drinking under the influence, and we've seen this as an issue in Colorado, I know we're very close to getting there on the technology, and that'll, I think, quickly change my position on that front. Secondly, I still want to understand, as we saw with tobacco, how products were marketed to children. I'm still very concerned about how exactly things like edible marijuana products and others, and gummy bears and chocolate chip cookies, how they make sure those weren't marketed to children.
Thank you. Mr. Pallotta, I assume you have also voted by now. How did you vote?
Look, medical marijuana, I will tell you, I agree. I think there's some great uses for it. As far as recreational, irrespective of whether you can find a way to test somebody, I am vehemently against the notion of recreational marijuana. I don't care what the cost or what the revenue stream looks like. And I think I heard earlier that if the testing was okay, if we're able to pull somebody over and know that they're high on alcohol or they're high on pot, whatever the difference is, you don't do it. 92% of heroin users started off with pot. So I don't think you need you don't need more evidence than that to tell you that any recreational marijuana use, irrespective of the tax revenues, is a failed and faulty process.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one last question before we go to closing statements. As I always seem to say in these debates, this goes much faster for me than it does for the two of you. Mr. Pallotta, I've got another hypothetical for you. If you're elected, and if Donald Trump is reelected, and the president calls you and he says, Congressman, I've got $2 billion, and I can either put it toward completing the wall or along the border of the United States and Mexico, or I can use it to fund the Gateway Tunnel. And he says, totally up to you, your call, I'll do whatever you want. What do you tell him to do?
Well, as a businessman, I would look to allocate $1 billion each, but I know that's not something that's not the answer you're looking for. Being where I'm from and knowing that we are a single seismic event away, I would look to the Gateway Tunnel. Why? Because my district elected me to represent them. And the people in my district who commute back and forth, not just intrastate, but interstate, I think that would be important. The other reason why I think I would opt for looking at the Gateway is we've made some pretty good strides at the border. We've started to put money toward the wall. We've actually started to use technology. We've seen fentanyl, the drug crossings start to drop. Fentanyl is down. It's still the largest drug that comes across the border. But I do think I would look because of the people in my district, and I would support them. And I would hope the president would understand that it would be to support them, that I would probably look to put that money toward the Gateway Tunnel.
Congressman, I'm going to ask you the same question. The Gateway Tunnel or the wall?
I agree, the Gateway Tunnel, and it is, as you know, nearly 110 years old, crumbling. That's how the whole Northeast relies on and is vital to our economy for these trains to be able to go back and forth to New York and New Jersey. And if we don't get on that right away, we in the next few years could have a massive crisis on our hand where nobody can get back and forth. $100 million a day hit to our economy if one of those tunnels goes down. The good news is we finally got about $250 million that many of us, including me, fought for from DOT to get the Portal Bridge going. It's one of the first steps in the project, but we still have a lot of work to do. One of the bills that I introduced, bipartisan legislation, was called the Doomsday Bill, which said to the administration, give us a plan. If one of those tunnels were to go down, what do we do about this? Because I don't see any plan. It's why, frankly, if we don't get this thing moving, we could have a massive crisis on our hands. So I hope whoever's in charge in the next administration puts this at the top of their list, as well as deals with our crumbling roads and our bridges that we've got to deal with. We have the 7th worst roads in the country. Our outdated infrastructure needs to be repaired. And so I'm hoping that's the first piece of legislative action in the next Congress.
Thank you. And now we're at the end where it's time for closing statements from each of you. Each candidate will have 90 seconds. And Mr. Pallotta, we'll start with you.
I appreciate it. David, thank you so much for having this. And Josh, again, thank you for being a part of this as well. And thank you, voters, for tuning in. I hope it was entertaining. I hope you learned a lot. I think at this point, with 9 days to go, you have two choices. In my opinion, Josh is everything that's wrong with Washington. He's a congressman whose money comes from outside the district. As we talked about it, 70% of his money comes from outside the state. He receives money from Wall Street, significant money from Wall Street, which means that I believe I'm in a position as a resident of this 5th district that he does not have my best interest in mind. 435 members of Congress, Josh is the #1 receiver of outside money. He's part of the Clinton machine. They've even dubbed him a family member of his. He is in the pocket of special interest, and that won't change. He doesn't really show up in the district from the people I talk to unless there's a photographer there and a podium and a microphone. There are 4 years of broken promises. Taxes that I've not seen lower. And I know his lawn signs around that are being put in front of mine all say Jersey values and lower taxes. I don't see any of them. He will not challenge Phil Murphy, will not challenge Nancy Pelosi, and he will not challenge AOC. That's choice one. You can then look to a political outsider. In my opinion, I think the political outsider is what we need. They mix things up. I spent 30 years in the private sector. I raised my family here. I own a small business right here in the district. I've proven through a Time Magazine award that veterans are very important to me. I created this program. I made no money off this program. We never charge veterans at all. But was that a wave, David?
It was. We're over.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your statement.
And I apologize. And you can take a couple extra seconds, Josh. Thanks. My parents taught me to do the right. I have a slide here. Hold on a second. I think it's my Mike Pence moment. My parents taught me the right thing, and I want to do what's right for my kids' future. I want to do what's right for the congressman's kids' future as well. And I think you'd vote. I'm running for my family. I'm mostly running for what I think is right for this country. So that's why I'm doing it, and I hope I've earned your vote. So thank you.
Thank you. Congressman, it's time for your what is probably 120 seconds if you want.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Frank, for being part of this important discussion. Over the past 4 years, I've fought tirelessly for our Jersey values, working across the aisle to get things done for every single county, community, and family in my district. I'm proud to have been named the most bipartisan member of Congress, a distinction I wear with honor. I recognize that if the extreme left is complaining that I'm too conservative and the extreme right that I'm too liberal, then I'm doing exactly what you hired me to do, fighting for what's best for us here in northern New Jersey. On the other hand, any opponent who you're obviously hearing from, my opponent would bring more extreme partisanship to Washington. Right now, when our families and businesses need help, Frank refuses to wear a mask himself and has said his first priority would be to ban masks for everyone. At this moment, when people want comfort in knowing their elected officials have their back, we cannot trust someone who pushed shady subprime mortgages on seniors and defrauded thousands of families and veterans. And when we need to come together as one community, Frank Pallotta refuses to condemn his white supremacist and anti-Semitic supporters, as we heard tonight, who lead homegrown terrorist groups in our own backyard. To me, what's best for North Jersey means fighting for you the only way I know how, by bringing people together and finding actual common ground. That's how we'll recover and rebuild stronger than ever. What's best for Jersey is always having the backs of our cops, our firefighters, our service members, and our veterans, and making healthcare more affordable, driving down prescription drug costs, protecting Medicare and Social Security for our seniors, and clawing back our federal tax dollars to make life more affordable here. These are Jersey values, and that's what I stand for. There's a lot more work to do, and I hope to have earned your support to go back to Congress to continue the work we've started together. I'd be honored. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. God bless. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And this brings the New Jersey Globe 5th District Congressional debate between Congressman Josh Gottheimer, the Democratic candidate, and Frank Pallotta, the Republican candidate, to a close. On Tuesday at 5 p.m., the New Jersey Globe will hold our last of 6 debates for the 2020 election. It's the first and only debate for the United States Senate between Cory Booker and his Republican challenger, Rick Mehta. So thank you, Congressman Gottheimer. Thank you, Mr. Pallotta. I appreciate you participating tonight and giving voters an opportunity to get to know both of you. Good luck to each of you. Stay safe and be well. And thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Good night.